up on Arirang News. After recent intrusions by Pyongyang's drones, South Korean President Yoon warns the 2018 Inter-Korean Military Pact could be suspended. This is if North Korea violates the South's territory again. The South Korean government expects the country's economy to experience difficulty, particularly in the first half of this year, and so it's set to spend aggressively. An all-time high of 65% of what the government plans to spend this year is to be executed in the first half. Grilling at the Nat'l Assembly over the deadly Halloween crowd crush in Itaewon. During the first parliamentary hearing today, lawmakers slammed police officials for their lack of response on the night of the tragedy. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in South Korea, and thank you for joining us on Arirang News. Security is the only place where we start off this evening. Following recent drone intrusion by North Korea, South Korea's commander-in-chief says any more of these trespasses could make the Inter-Korean military agreement on halt. The South is also speeding up to establish a drone unit. Our Kim Do-yeon leads our coverage tonight.
South Korean President Yoon is warning North Korea that its behavior is putting the 2018 Inter-Korean military agreement at risk.
President Yoon was briefed on Wednesday by the National Security Office, the Defense Ministry, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Defense Development Agency on our drone defense strategy. He ordered officials to review suspending the September 19th Inter-Korean military agreement if North Korea carries out provocations involving incursion into our territory.
The 2018 Inter-Korean military agreement refers to an agreement signed by former President Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un back in 2018, which prohibits the two Koreas from flying around and carrying out on-land military exercises, including artillery firing around the military demarcation line, while also putting buffer zones along their sea borders, in order to prevent direct confrontations. However, North Korea has violated the terms of the agreement several times, most recently flying drones into the South Korean territory as far as into the northern side of the capital. That said, on top of his statement, President Yoon also issued 4 directives to the defense minister. 1. To create a drone unit that can both carry out reconnaissance as well as combat. 2. To mass-produce small drones that are hard to detect within this year. 3. To develop stealth drones. And lastly, to quickly come up with an anti-drone system. An official at the Defense Ministry expressed confidence that all the orders do seem possible to carry out. This includes creating a new multi-purpose drone unit. The official said that while creating a new unit requires the ministry to review a number of items, including the new unit's scope of operation, chain of command, as well as resources, the process will be expedited as much as possible. However, there was no specific timeline given. As for developing a stealth drone within this year, according to the official, the Defense Development Agency has already been doing research into stealth drones, and by pushing things faster, such drone will be developed by the end of the year. South Korea has already had a drone unit since 2018, but the unit had much smaller scope of operation with not much on-field exercise and experience, according to the official. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Slowing economy is scrambling the government plan for more spending in efforts to save the Korean economy. Our Kim Hyun-sung tells us more on what was discussed at the year's first emergency economic meeting.
The South Korean government is set to kick off the year with some aggressive spending. The finance ministry on Wednesday said that it's going to spend more than half of the funds early in the year.
We will rapidly put over 65% of the central government's funds to use in the first half of the year, the highest level of spending ever.
The local governments will follow suit and spend more than 60% in the first half of the year. This comes amid high inflation and slowing employment. The ministry projects this rocky start to continue throughout the first half of the year and rebound in the latter half. So it's also making a bold move to try to boost employment. It's pulling forward recruitment dates and spending over 70% of its job budget in the first half of 2023. For inflation, it's putting some extra measures in place to tame prices ahead of this Seollal or Lunar New Year holiday.
We will try to lower the prices of 16 commodities that are in high demand, including apples, pears and pork, by supplying 208,000 tons of goods, which is the most ever, and providing 30 billion Korean won for discounts.
That's more than $23 million of discounts for the items that are most in demand during this Seollal holiday. The minister also vowed to consider the needs of those living under the poverty line. With energy prices soaring and temperatures dropping, those living in poverty may struggle to keep their homes warm. The ministry will in turn boost discounts for energy prices as well. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
The nation doubles down on its effort to boost productivity and efficiency when it comes to agriculture and oceans and fisheries. It was the focal point of today's policy briefing to the president. Shin Se-byuk with the latest.
South Korea is going to ramp up its efforts to boost productivity in the agricultural and marine industries in parallel with the era of digitalization. On Wednesday, the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs and the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries presented their policy plans for the upcoming year to President Yoon. At the briefing, President Yoon stressed the importance of improving the productivity and efficiency of each industry, saying the two ministries are dealing with the important matters related to food.
지금은 이제 4차 산업혁명의 시대입니다. 그리고 디지털화가 점점 심화, 고도화되는 그런 상황입니다. 그래서 이런 산업자원부라든지 이런 중기벤처부뿐만이 아니라 농수산 또 해양 이런 것을 담당하는 부처에서도 담당하고 있는 산업이 더욱 디지털화되고 더욱 첨단화되고 또 더욱 그 혁신을 이뤄내서 생산성을 높이는 것이 매우 중요합니다.
To start with, the government has set the goal of achieving $10 billion in agricultural exports this year. To achieve that, and for the future of the South Korea's agriculture industry, it will promote smart farming as a future growth engine. Under the plan, the ministry will also work to turn 30% of all greenhouses and barns into the so-called smart facilities by 2027. Also, to nurture young farmers, it will build 3 new smart farms tailored to each region and 2 young farmer startups hubs equipped with smart farms and residences. The Oceans Ministry, meanwhile, unveiled its ambitious plan to create a marine leisure tourism belt in the country's southern coastal area. Under the plan, Busan and the provinces of Gyeongsang-namdo and Jeollanam-do will become major tourist destinations in Northeast Asia. Also, the ministry plans to build 5 of what it calls Korean Cancuns, a reference to the popular resort city in Mexico. Another plan rolled out is to build smart megaports in Busan and Jinhae. In Busan in particular, it plans to establish a smart logistics center. Detailed plans for a new port in Jinhae are due in June this year. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
South Korea's exports of things like music, movies, and games rose to all-time high in 2021 thanks to the rising popularity of Korean culture worldwide. A report from Seoul's Culture Ministry shows that exports in the content sector in 2021 came to $11.92 billion, an increase of 4.4% on year. The content industry includes music, games, broadcast materials, films, and more. It's emerged as one of the major drivers of South Korea's exports in recent years, exceeding the total value of home appliances, secondary batteries, and electric vehicles. The minimum wage in South Korea has risen at the start of 2023, while the government is aiming to increase flexibility in the current 52-hour workweek. What changes will shake up the labor market this year? Our Itaewon tells us what to expect.
It's now the era of the 2 million won salary. The minimum hourly wage in 2023 has been set at $9,621. At the current exchange rate, it's approximately $7.50. That's up 5% or about 30 cents from last year. This is applied from the first day of this year. Converting this into a monthly payment, assuming someone works 209 hours a month, this would come to around 2.01 million won or $1,570. This was decided back in June by the Minimum Wage Commission, considering the needs of small businesses hit hard by the pandemic. Here's what some members of the public had to say on the wage increase.
The minimum wage is now almost 10,000 won, and I think it's a little too much. Convenience stores are run by owners these days because they need to pay part-time workers 2 million won a month if they hire them.
Considering rising consumer prices, I think the recent minimum wage increase is not enough. Think about the salaries that young people get. I'm hoping for the wage to rise even more.
Apart from the minimum wage, the Yoon administration is set to increase flexibility in the 52-hour work week. Earlier last month, the Future Labor Market Research Association advised that labor and management be allowed to manage overtime work hours on a monthly, quarterly, half-yearly, or even yearly basis in addition to the current weekly basis. The association also recommended allowing workers to freely set their work hours. But there's a rocky road ahead as a labor umbrella organization has opposed the new policy proposals. An expert says there should be additional measures to prevent overwork.
At least the government should set the maximum working days in a week. With flexible working hours, a worker might have to work even 7 days a week when there's too big a workload. To prevent this, there should be restrictions on the number of working days an employer can order an employee to work, like less than 5 days a week.
The government would have to consider additional measures for any possible excessive workload that may harm the health of workers, as controversy still remains about whether the new work system can be properly implemented. Itaewon, Arirang News.
For South Korea's full-time salaried workers, January is time to file their year-end taxes until they get February salary. On January 15th, the National Tax Service will start to offer a simplified service that provides all the basic data needed to report income and do deductions. It can be found by logging into the NTS website at hometax.go.kr. Taxpayers could save more money this year because if their credit card spending last year has increased by more than 5% compared to 2021, they can get tax deductions of up to 1 million won, which is about $800. Also, benefits for those who spent more at traditional markets. For both groups, 20% of the increased spending is deductible. Today at the National Assembly, there were grillings and heated debate over the Itaewon crowd crush. At a parliamentary probe, lawmakers grilled the police response on that tragic night. Our National Assembly correspondent Lee Si-hoo reports.
Firefighter Yoo Hae-jin was at the site of the tragic crowd crush in Itaewon in late October. She made an emotional apology on Wednesday to the families of the victims.
The firefighters and I did all that we could with all our might, but we're deeply sorry to the families of the victims for the terrible results.
This is at the first parliamentary hearing organized by the National Assembly's Special Committee on the Parliamentary Probe into the Itaewon tragedy. The bipartisan hearing was held as part of the parliamentary probe to investigate how the tragedy happened and to prevent similar incidents in the future. Legislators lamented the lack of proper action from officials leading up to and during the incident that took 159 lives.
The people of South Korea cannot but stop and think that such a huge tragedy wouldn't have taken place if there were responsible judgment and action from the public officials.
The government, transportation, security, 112, they all failed. In other words, it was a complete failure.
Many questions were focused on the response from the police. The PPP heavily questioned the former head of the Yongsan police station, Lee Im-jae. The DP denounced that the police did not thoroughly prepare for crowd control because they focused their manpower on preventing other crimes like drug use. Among others summoned as witnesses were National Police Chief Yoon, Chief of the Seoul Metropolitan Police Agency Kim Kwang-ho, and the Chief of Yongsan Fire Station Choi Sung-bum. A total of 44 witnesses have been summoned, with all but 7 present in the morning. The second hearing is scheduled to take place on Friday with the Interior Minister Lee Sang-min and Seoul Mayor Oh Se-hoon set to appear. Meanwhile, the 45-day parliamentary probe ends this Saturday. The main opposition Democratic Party has called for an extension, but the ruling People Power Party said they would need to further discuss with the special committee on how long any extension should be. Lee Si-hu, Arirang News.
In the last week, more than 40% of South Korea's COVID-19 confirmed cases from abroad have turned out to be from China. The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency says out of 587 confirmed cases from overseas in the last 7 days, 246 of them were from China. With the start of the PCR test mandate for travelers coming in from China, on Wednesday, those arriving from China accounted for 76% of all the confirmed cases from overseas. The health authorities are discussing additional ways to strengthen quarantine measures when entering the country and searching for ways to prevent the COVID-19 wave from China spreading around South Korea. This could include more inoculation drives using improved vaccines. The funeral of former Pope Benedict XVI will come to an end Wednesday evening local time. Tens of thousands of people from all across the globe have been paying their respects at St. Peter's Square since Monday. Pope Francis will preside over a funeral mass on Thursday, the first time the modern age that a current pope will eulogize a retired one. The former pope died in the Vatican monastery last Saturday at the age of 95. Meanwhile, marking the 60th anniversary of diplomatic ties with the Vatican, South Korea's deputy ambassador to the UN, Oh Hyun-ju, has been appointed as Seoul's top envoy to the Vatican. She'll be the first woman to serve in the position. Ambassador Oh is known for her expertise in multilateral diplomacy and in international development cooperation. Turning to the latest on the war in Ukraine, Ukraine's president says that the country is preparing for a scenario where Russia is expected to throw everything it has left to turn the tide of the war. This comes after both Russia and Ukraine have acknowledged one of the deadliest single attacks of the conflict. Kim Mo-kyun with the story.
We have to thwart that Russian scenario. We are preparing for that. The terrorists have to lose. Any attempt at an offensive by them has to fail. It will be the final defeat of the terrorist state.
That's what Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said during his video address on Tuesday local time. He said that Russia will throw everything it has left to try to turn the tide of the war and vowed to block that scenario by all means. This comes as Russian drone strikes appear to have increased lately, with Moscow launching attacks on cities and power stations across Ukraine over the past few nights. It also follows Ukraine's confirmation of a missile strike on Makiivka in the Russian-occupied region of Donetsk on New Year's Day. Ukraine's military said it launched a strike on a vocational school used by Russian troops and that the strike killed at least 400 troops and destroyed up to 10 units of Russian military equipment. Russia also acknowledged the attack and claimed it lost 89 servicemen. Moscow claims the strike was caused by the collective use of banned cell phones by troops within the range of Ukrainian weapons. The latest attack has led to the highest number of deaths acknowledged by Moscow in a single incident since it launched its invasion 10 months ago. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
While Google and Meta remain the largest digital advertisers in the U.S. market, recent data show their dominance is quickly fading. Research firm Insider Intelligence says their combined market share is expected to have fallen last year to 44.9%. This would be the first time in 8 years it's been below 50%. Meta sustained a heavier loss of over 3 percentage points in market share due to Apple's new policy requiring apps to ask users if they want to be tracked. Data suggests that Google and Meta are still expanding in the ad business, but at a slower pace than the rest of the market. The age-old wisdom is that practice makes perfect, and this is precisely what researchers are hoping to ensure for those seeking to decommission nuclear power plants by offering them the chance to try things out under simulation. Jung Eun-ju tells us what this means.
This is Unit 1 of the Kori nuclear power plant in Busan. It's been suspended since 2017. The nuclear fuel rods inside will one day need to be taken out, but that requires a special tool. South Korean researchers have developed a type of simulator to help people learn how to dismantle nuclear power plants. The worker can alter the position and shape of the cut and change the intensity of the laser according to the thickness of the wall. Data on laser properties, wall thickness, and dimensions were taken into account during the simulator's development. Researchers also replicated the underwater environment inside the reactor and used the various data during the development stage. The simulator helps operators practice cutting methods that generate minimal secondary waste and even trains people on how to efficiently load cutting waste into containers.
Since it's impossible to know how much laser power is needed or how to set the speed, this simulator helps us predict how to work while controlling the output to some extent.
The global nuclear power plant decommissioning market is expected to reach around $150 billion by the year 2050. It is also expected to expand further as there are over 200 nuclear power plants that have been permanently shut down worldwide and almost 300 that have been in operation for more than 30 years and are considered to be old. There are, however, only 4 countries, the United States, Japan, Germany, and Switzerland, with experience in decommissioning nuclear power plants, and all these countries have dismantled them in the traditional way, by sending workers into the reactor. South Korean researchers hope to become competitive in the global nuclear power plant dismantling market with the newly developed simulator. Jung Eun-ju, Arirang News.
The extreme cold wave that gripped South Korea for the past couple of days will start to ease off tomorrow. Temperatures will hover around the seasonal average for most regions starting in the afternoon. For tomorrow, highs will be reaching 4 degrees Celsius and conditions will get much warmer on Friday. With a rise in temperatures, there will be an inflow of fine dust from overseas. Western regions will see air quality standing in the bad category tomorrow. That includes parts of the Seoul metropolitan area, Chungcheongdo and Jeollado provinces, as well as Jeju Island. For those in the area, make sure to wear a mask like a KF94 that can filter out the dust particles. Tomorrow, Seoul will be starting up at -6 degrees. Chuncheon will be extra cold at -12. Daytime temperatures will be returning to the positive range nationwide. Highs in Seoul will get up to 4 degrees. Daejeon 5, Busan will be warm at 10 degrees Celsius. The entire nation will see a mix of rain or snowfall on Friday and Saturday. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all for this Wednesday night's newscast. Thank you for staying with us. We'll be back with the most up-to-date news tomorrow. Good night.
A reclusive country, a small country on the map of the world, the land of morning